panel. Today, we gather to reflect on the powerful intersections of voting rights, political engagement, education, and faith, and the ways women have shaped and continue to shape these spaces. Throughout history, women have drawn strength from their convictions, their education, and their communities to advocate for justice and opportunity. From the courageous leadership of women like Fannie Lou Hamer, who challenged barriers to voting and political representation, to educators and faith leaders who have nurtured generations of thinkers and activists. Women have consistently transformed their communities through courage, wisdom, and resilience. Education equips individuals with knowledge and critical thinking. Faith communities often cultivate moral vision and purpose, and civic participation allows that vision and knowledge to shape the broader society. When women bring their voices and leadership to all these spaces, meaningful change becomes possible. Today, our panelists will help us explore how these forces, education, faith, civic responsibility, and leadership continue to influence the lives of women and the future of our communities. My hope is that our conversation will not only inform us, but that it will also inspire and encourage us to consider the ways we can lead, serve, and participate in shaping a more just and hopeful future. So at this time, I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves, starting with my immediate left.
Good afternoon. My name is Alison McLetchie, and I'm an associate professor at South Carolina State University, where I teach sociology and anthropology. Good afternoon. My name is Annette Grevious, and I'm a professor of speech and theater at Claflin University, and also a city council person for the city of Orangeburg, representing District 4.
Good afternoon, I'm Aurora Kelly Smalls, and I am the director of Orangeburg County Voter Registration and Election. Been there for 13 years.
Good afternoon, my name is Betty Clark. I am the presiding elder of the Santee District of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Good evening.
Thank you and welcome to all of you. We'll start first with voting rights and civic responsibility. How do you see the legacy of women's suffrage, and especially the contributions of women of color, shaping the way women participate in civic life today?
Yeah, I guess that's my question.
I'm gonna be your question, Ms. Small.
So, I see more, women voting. When we vote, we have, the opportunity, which a lot of people do not take the opportunity to come out and vote. But we as women, and especially the older, senior community, they come out a little more than the younger community. I think something has been lost with the younger community, but the older seniors, a lot of them could vote absentee, which means that they could get a ballot mailed to them, but they prefer to come out and cast their ballot to make sure that ballot is cast. But we have more seniors voting than the younger community. And overall, it is more seniors voting than the younger community. Then we have the adult that, which I guess someone is my age. So we have like the 40+ community, which votes a little more, and anything lower than 40 is a little hard for them to come out and vote. But I'm hoping and wishing and praying that for the upcoming elections, we have a little more participation with the seniors and younger adults, because it is very important that we cast our ballots.
Thank you. Let me give you a little bit of a break and move to political leadership. So this will be for Ms. Grevious. What barriers still exist for women who seek political leadership, and how can communities and educational institutions better prepare and support women to step into those roles?
So I'm gonna start with the latter part of that question first,
Thank you.
I think, and also piggyback a little bit off of what Ms. Small said in terms of voter education. Voter education, I think, is extremely important on all fronts. And when we look at the younger community and preparing those younger adults for civic leadership, I think it's important that they are educated, one, on those issues that not only affect them, because there are a lot of issues that are affecting them now, and also just the broader community and understanding how those issues might affect them even later on. These younger adults are the people who are leading us as we grow older. And so I think it's a matter of providing that education and understanding why it's important, why understanding that this wasn't something that they always had the right to do. And so being able to take action and partake and participate in these voting, in these elections is extremely important. And so I think the bottom line in all aspects of the question is education and understanding that what they do now is going to affect their future many years down the road. So education.
Thank you. And education is activism. And so that brings us to the next question, education and empowerment. Either one of you, I think, can take this question. In what ways has education historically empowered women to influence social change? And how can colleges and universities continue to cultivate informed and engaged women leaders?
Okay, so I'm gonna take this, and I know that Ms. Grevious has a lot to say. So one of the things as a college professor that teaches at state that is very troubling and concerning to me is that lack of participation of our young people. I like to remind them that Orangeburg is really unique, right? Orangeburg, if we think about the history of Orangeburg, and I've been doing a lot of reading of history, I just finished Jim Clagwin's book, and I finished Eugene Robinson's book as well. Deep ties to Orangeburg, okay? So if we understand that even in the midst of segregation, Orangeburg had 2 HBCUs. So there was this production of this Black intelligentsia that helped shape the civil rights movement. Then obviously we had the Orangeburg massacre, but the Orangeburg massacre didn't just happen, right? It took place over, there was this long march towards it, more than 10 years. Unfortunately, what has emerged very often in that narrative of the Orangeburg massacre is the silencing of the women who were part of that movement, who were injured as a result of that, who left, who were, sent home and never came back. And so I think a lot of the times, many of these incidents are narrated by a male voice, and it silences the female voice. And I think we have to be intentional in recentering that, but we also have to be intentional in reminding our students, starting from middle school, quite frankly, not even waiting for them to get to high school, but to remind them of just how important these movements have been, right? Whether it is the civil rights movement or, the women's rights movement, whichever it is, to kind of remind them of that. I think that's super important because we cannot wait for them to turn 18 and for them to suddenly realize, oh, I need to vote, right? That has to be embedded from early, and they have to be reminded of it time and time again. And so I think that's the role. And maybe the shortcoming of educators, right? That we haven't done that good job of doing that.
I want to also speak on that. So, what we do also is not just register disabled adults. We try to go out to the schools, or we have been going out to the schools. And a lot of times people say, well, you know, my child has not gotten registered. Well, I challenge you all to go to the schools, check with your church, check with the students that are your grandkids, make sure they are registered to vote. So we have been going out, registering students to different high schools. It is a challenge. You would not believe to get into the high school to do voter registration drives. And you would think that would be something easy. When I went to school, I registered at school. So we've been trying to get to the schools. There are certain schools, oh, I'll call you back. I'll get with you. But they are waiting on me to give up. That is not gonna happen. So what we've been doing, well, we mail a letter, we call back. So what I'm starting to do is, I guess I just have to call them out. So-and-so school has not allowed us to come and register the students. So as parents, we need to make sure our students know that they have to vote. My kids know that's not an option. They are voting. It's time to vote. Me and my husband make sure, hey, have you voted yet? I have one that's away. I'll make sure she get her absentee so that she can vote. So it's not an option. When we go to the colleges, we make sure and register. Now, we have some sororities and fraternities. They make sure that the students are registered. That is just one step.
Yeah.
We need to do the final step and make sure that they go to the polls and vote. We have a precinct at South Carolina State University. It should be packed. We would rather have anybody to come out and vote. Now, that needs to be an essential part. Now, we've had where we work with classroom students where they get credit for making sure that they register to vote. Well, that's just one part. They need to make sure and go to the poll. Well, a lot of times they march to the poll, but 2 or 3 is registered to vote. So we need to make sure that they get registered to vote. And if they're not a registered voter here, make sure they vote wherever it is they're from, because they can vote absentee. So we, as adults, need to make sure. If I'm at my church, I'm like, seniors, did you register yet? Well, here's your application. I will take it back. So, you know, we need to do that. Applications, you can come out our office anytime and pick up an application. You can do a voter registration drive, but it's not a done deal. So we can't leave it to the seniors that have already done their part. We need to pick up the ball and continue to carry on and make sure that all students or anyone that is eligible get registered and get to the polls.
I thank you really for your persistence in making sure that young people understand the importance of voting. And I would like to add just from a personal experience that we seem to be in a different kind of era right now when it comes to voting rights and voter education. So the deliberate act of actually getting registered to vote and carrying out the franchise is going to really take more determination at all levels. And so it is a question of education, but it's also a question of whether or not it is taught as a value before that person becomes 17 or 18 years old and eligible to register to vote. Next now, and this is certainly,
I just wanted.
you want to add,
I wanted to add to that.
please do.
From the perspective of a grandmother and as a religious leader. From the perspective of a grandmother, I have a 12-year-old granddaughter who has been at every election along with me and her mother. She then has the sticker that says, I voted. And if school is open, I make it a point for her to wear it the next day to school. We model for our children so that our children can model for others. That's from the grandparents. From the religious perspective, one of the questions I ask as a presiding elder is, how many registered voters are in every church? I get a good answer. But the next question I pose is, how many of you voted in the last election? Will you raise your hand? That's accountability. And so in asking the question and doing a follow-up to the question, I make it that voter registration and participation is not something we do when we get around to it, but it's something that is vital for every generation.
Yes, it is. And I wish that young people understood that in carrying out the vote, you're oftentimes looking at policy changes that will impact their lives when they are our ages. They may not realize that as college students, but there are policies in place right now that I can speak to, as many of us can as senior citizens, that were actually enacted when we were either children or even before we were born. That we now, I can think of one in particular, Medicare for me, and before that, Social Security for probably all of us in this room. We were not here when that federal legislation took place. So we're going to get to faith in public life. Reverend Dr. Clark. How can religious communities encourage women's voices in conversations about social justice, voting rights, and political engagement while remaining grounded in their faith tradition?
Well, I think I've answered part of that, but
Yes, you have.
let me just continue. I think if we would, as I said before, model the life we want others to live, you don't have to let your presence often speak for you and your words can have a rest. But to actually say to people that your vote is your voice and to keep saying it over and over again so that they will know that if you have something to say, vote on it. Or you're not voting is to say, I don't care, even though it affects me.
So very strong indictment. I don't care. The education part of it, though, still keeps coming back to why it is so important that people have the information and become informed members of society so that they can have information to make choices that will not just benefit the here and the now, but is also what is to come. So this is an intersectional question about identity and advocacy. How do race, faith, education, and gender intersect in shaping the political priorities and civic engagement of women today? Any one of you can take that. That's good.
Okay, I'm gonna try, I'm gonna start, okay? So if we think, I like the fact that you use the word intersectionality, even though, you know, for some folks, that's a problematic word, right?
Yes.
But we are intersectional people, right? Most of us in this room are women. Most of us in this room are women of color. You know, our age affects us, our sexuality affects us, where we live affects us, our income. All those things are things that we bring together in who we are. And those are the things that we consider intersectional, right? That we draw on. I would say that it is difficult sometimes as a person of faith, for example, to look at civil life and figure out, okay, you know, this person says they're pro this person says they're anti this. How am I going to come down as a person of faith, as a woman, as someone who is who has an advanced degree, who doesn't have, you know, all those things factor in. But the idea, I think, is first the recognition that we're not just one thing,
Yes.
right? And because we're not just one thing, we should be able to consider and to interrogate all the parts of us. And I will just use myself as an example. So I have this habit of writing to my church from time to time when I think
they're going down the wrong way. No theological training, right? But I make a point of using my voice to say, hey, this isn't quite what you claim to teach. So why are you doing whatever? Now, sometimes they write back, sometimes they ignore me, but that's okay. Because for me personally, I think it is more important for me to be part of that community that I hope, as for example, a Christian, you say, you know, the kingdom here on earth, but are you building that, right? And so am I willing to anger this one person who might be upset with me, who may not want me to come back, that worship space, in order to make myself, to say this is what I think we ought to be focused on. So it is, for me, important for us to recognize that we have all these various things that run through us. And to acknowledge them so that when we are able to make those decisions, they're informed by the wholeness of who we are. One thing.
Very well said. I just have kind of one thing to add to that in terms of issues affecting us, being intersectionality or intersectionality affecting all of us in some way. The issues affect all of us. If it doesn't affect us directly, it's affecting us indirectly.
Yes.
My sister, my brother, my mother, my grandfather, my neighbor, the children we will teach. So with that being said, I think we should want to have that education and be informed on all of the issues because it's going to impact us directly or indirectly in some way down the road or immediately.
And we covered our intersectionality and identity. So this I want to come back to is sort of under the broad head of education and it does impact all of us. And this is artificial intelligence. So certainly everybody can speak to this one. How is AI influencing your individual fields and what do you think of the artificial intelligence impact on your particular fields at this time and say going forward in the immediate future?
Just earlier this week, I was sitting at a table, having dinner with 6 other individuals. And they were talking about the role of a preacher. And they said that being a preacher is easy. And they proved it to themselves by taking out their phone and asking, I think it was GPT chat. To write them, yes, to write them a sermon on the 23rd Psalm. And it did, just like that. And they said, I can get up Sunday and I can do this. So, you know, why pay the preacher what we pay the preacher? And because in their mind, a preacher's role is Sunday morning and Sunday morning only, whereas anybody who really has a real pastor, you know that it goes far beyond 9 to 5. Because 2 o'clock in the morning, you can get a phone call, and as a pastor, you should respond. Notice I use the word should. Moving forward, AI has really, it has swept through every area of the world.
Absolutely.
And the question is, what will we do about it? Well, as far as I'm concerned, from the religious perspective, I won't even try to compete with someone writing a sermon using AI. But I know the difference between AI and the Holy Spirit. And if you know the Spirit, you'll know when someone has received the word, and you'll know when someone has created a word. So for me, I'm good.
Well, I think AI gives everyone that false sense that they can do any and everything, not just deliver a sermon, but because they can just quickly put in something in Chat GPT and get something back in a matter of seconds, that gives them that false sense of I can do this. But as you said, it's not going away. If anything, I think it's going to get worse. And as an educator, I try to find ways to incorporate AI, but let my students know that one, yes, I can tell the difference between AI and your words, but because I know it's going to be there, I know it's going to be present, they're going to use it in front of me, behind me, or whatever. So I just try to find a way to use that as a I don't want to say foundation, but just incorporate it in ways that are more meaningful for them to use it and make that as a bridge to something else to get into their own work. And if they are going to use it, let people know that you're using it.
Exactly. Exactly. I stand here as a dinosaur myself. I'm actually reading from handwritten notes. Maybe in full opposition to AI. And as a classroom professor myself, I have gone back to in-class assignments and paper tests. Yes. So this brings us to our personal civic engagement. What experiences through family or church life or school life or in your community most influenced your understanding of the importance of voting or civic participation? Who wants to start?
So I will start by saying, I hope you recognize that I have an accent. So I'm an immigrant, right? And as an immigrant who has lived here for more than 25 years, you know, moving from all those various immigrant statuses to eventually becoming a citizen, is important. It wasn't done lightly. And so for me, it's very personal. It is, I'm also a member of the Americans for Civil Liberties Board for South Carolina, because I believe in those things. You know, I believe in the idea of free speech. I may not agree with what you say. I may think it is completely horrendous, but I will defend your right to say it. And I think that is super important. And that's why I'm saying, as you keep hopping on this idea of education, right? If we think about what, again, as an immigrant, what America holds itself out to the world to be, right? I live here, I want that to be. I want that reality to take. So it's a very personal thing.
Well, I'll go back to when my mother ran for office. And I thought it was important then to vote, but then when you're campaigning, you realize that people just don't care. And you wonder why. And the things that, you know, it's like, well, it doesn't matter. It matters, you know, and as you see nowadays, you see the same people in office. Why? Because no one goes out and vote. And if they do, they don't take the time to study and make sure that they get in the right candidates. I'm not saying that the candidates we have are bad, but what I'm saying is they come to the polls and they're asking, well, who should I vote for? Really? I have to be impartial, but you should do your due diligence and check on them. If you were going to the doctor, you just randomly go to anyone, you talk to someone and ask someone, how do you think that this doctor, you know, is this a good person? You go into a church, you decide on, you know, you made some research, you've done some research. So our voting should not just be something that I just get up in the morning and just decide to go and do. I have done the research, I know who I'm going to vote for. And I've also ran for office. And when I ran for office, at the time I ran for city council, and I think I ran for school board also. But when I ran for city council, you had to go and knock on the doors and get, people to sign the petition. Well, you wouldn't believe, back in the day, you knew your neighbors. Well, that's how I got to know my neighbors, by knocking on the doors. But it's just engagement, and like she said, freedom of speech. I'm still old school. I feel like, there's a time and place to say things. Just because you have the right to say it don't mean that you should say it, and that's a lot of the issues that we have. Because I have the right to speak, I should just say it. But remember, we always teach kids, words don't hurt, but we do know that they do. And once you've said something, you cannot take it back. And so we have to think about that sometimes when we are doing things. And also, when people are looking to be an official, they realize that quickly, because the minute you say something and it's out there, there's nothing you can do to take it back. You may be a good person, but it just maybe was a bad day. But that can be something that will cause you to lose an election. But I think it's very important that we educate ourselves and make sure that we are doing everything we can do to make sure that we get the right people in office. Everybody promised to do everything. We know that it's impossible to do everything. We know it's impossible because it's impossible for us to do everything. And the minute someone doesn't do what you want, then see, they lied, they said it's impossible. And remember, everybody has one vote, just like we have one vote. So it's important that we, not just, a lot of times people say, I'm not going out to the poll because none of them are good. Well, you got to think about it. You weed out the good from the bad. And is this person going to be able to accomplish some things or a little more than the other? And that's what we have to remember when we go out to vote. We can't just say that they're not going to be able to do anything, where if they wasn't, they wouldn't be running. So you got to make sure you weed out and make sure that you get the right candidate and make sure that the person can at least get some things accomplished. And how do they know what affects you unless you open your mouth and say so?
So Reverend Dr. Clark, what was it in your life? For me, it was definitely family that impressed upon me the importance of.
Well, for me, it was family, and the church played a major role. I grew up in an area where we were educated about our politicians through the church. It came across the pulpit. Now I find creative ways through having a forum or such as this, and allowing the candidates to speak, and then coming back and taking the people and say, let's talk about it. What did you hear? And so without shaping their thoughts, I'm helping to shape their thoughts.
And I'm sure we appreciate you. And that also is a reaction to the times that we find ourselves in that you have to approach it in that manner. So as a public official, Ms. Grevious, would you like to speak to this issue?
Yes, so for me, I remember as a small child asking my mother about voting. She was a civil service employee, and so we moved a lot often. But I remember her casting her absentee ballots, or if we hadn't been in a place for very long, we were just voting in general. But she would never talk about like who she voted for or anything like that. She said that's private. But I think as I got older, I understood the importance of voting on a national level. So I thought like it was more important for me to vote on a national level. But then I realized as I got even older how important it was to vote locally, and how much the local elections truly influenced, individuals, like closely. You know, national elections are important as well, I'm not saying that. But your local elections, that's where you can truly, I think, shape your communities and affect change. So that's my backstory. And I got involved locally. I've been in Orangeburg. I'm not an Orangeburgian, but I've been here for 20+ years. So I consider myself an Orangeburgian. As I said, I traveled a lot when I was younger. This is the longest I've ever been in one place, and I came here thinking I was going to be here 5 years. So 15 plus, 15+ years. I felt like God kept me here for a reason, and there was still work for me to do here. And so I'm going back to that, you know, how do we prepare younger leaders or that younger generation? I saw an opportunity where I could, you know, speak about this, I could complain about this, but I could also get in there and try to affect some sort of change or contribute to progress, versus just talking about it on the sidelines.
So you wanted to do something about circumstances that you saw around you. And then you, Dr. McLetchie, you bring a naturalized citizen perspective on politics in this country, which are both very important perspectives to bring to the table and to share with others. And we thank you for that. So now we're going to talk about women's voices in leadership. And this is still for each of you. Where do you think women's voices are still underrepresented today in politics, education, or religious spaces? And what practical steps do you think we can take to help change that? I thought that it would wind up there.
Well, personally, I think that when you look at the political arena, you see very few female faces. So therefore, for me, I have to evaluate what is being said by those few voices and to quantitate the power of what they've said. How can I help to make it better? How can I help to make their voices heard even stronger? First of all, by listening. Giving active listening skills. I was told as a preacher early on that my biggest contender would be other women. Not men, but women. Because we're being filmed and screened, I won't answer that question as to what I think about it. But what I will say is that I think if we would value the voice of other women, others would do the same, especially as women of color. We cannot dismiss one another, but we must join ranks with each other and march forward.
Thank you. Who wants to go next? Because you're saying we should be that model for each other. Yes.
So I would say in all those arenas you talked about, women's voices are absent. In religious leadership, in political life, even in education. We have lots of women who are public school teachers, but not necessarily lots of women principals and district office leaders or on school boards, right? But the other thing that I want to, and I like to point out, and this will get me in trouble, not because someone is a woman, they share your interests as a woman, right? There are women whose political views are radically different from mine, right? And if we look at South Carolina, you know, we talk about the sister senators.
Yes.
And we see that sometimes there are issues that particularly affect women, that other women will negate will work to undermine, because they may hold very strong religious views on those topics, right? So what I hope we can do is just as Reverend Doctor said, listen to what the candidate is saying. Whether they are a woman or a man, black, white, or polka dot. Listen to what they have to say and then make your own decision based on whether or not what they're saying represents what you want. Because this is a representative democracy. And that's what becomes important.
I think, just something to add to that just a little bit is, going back to, Reverend Dr. Clark said in terms of modeling something and also, going back to education as well, even from that very young age and showing in terms of how do we get more, leaders, female leaders or women leaders in, all of these spaces, showing them that they can, from a very young age, as little girls, they can hold these positions, and these are things that they should aspire to be. And I don't think that happens as much as as early enough, or as much as it should.
I just think that, as being women and being mothers, we always listen to our mother. But we forget that our mother is those politicians, those teachers, those principals, when it's time to go and vote, we forget about them. And realize that the woman is the one that, is the head of everything. She is the one that, when you're sick, you're calling your mother. When you got a problem, you call her mother. So she's the one that always has the answers. So why is it when it's time to vote for a woman, she don't have any answers? So think about that, we, like you said, we don't have superintendents, we have some principals, but superintendents, it's hard to see as a woman. But we just have to engage and uplift each other as women and not try to tear down each other. Sometimes, if you don't believe in some of the things, just still vote for the best candidate. And we just have to listen a little more. A lot of times we think that we know, but where are we thinking and where are we getting those opinions from? Are we getting it from the person or are we getting it from hearsay? So it's important to listen what the person have to say and engage. And if there's something that you don't agree with, maybe you can have a discussion with that person to make sure that you really understand what they're talking about.
So before we close, I'd like to open the floor to questions for our panelists. I'll come around and take a microphone. Want to tell us who you are?
I'm Patricia Bride. I came up in a family of ministers, sister, my father, and my uncle, my godfather. But who did all the work at church?
Yeah.
The altar guild, that was all women. The people who did all the back stuff, it's all women. They're actually in positions of power, but how many of them become ministers? I'm lucky that my sister decided to do that. She had gone through, she was a counselor for abused children. She was an instructor for blind before that. But then she decided, I think I need to go into that area. But we've got more people who are doing that in the churches now. And in schools, I work for two people who were women who were my principals. Neither one of them took their job as a woman. They modeled after the men involved.
Well,
So you asking,
Yeah, I'm just asking about what's going on.
well, first of all, I tell people that I'm not a woman preacher. I'm a preacher who happens to be a woman.
correct.
So therefore, I model after whatever the word says and what I see good in others. And so whether you're male, female, or polka dot, if you have something good to offer, I take it as something that I want to add to my repertoire in serving other people. So to quickly answer your question, females are models, females are leaders and have been leaders in the church. And sometimes they were leaders and they did all the work in the church because there was no one else to do it. Not so because they volunteered, because they knew it needed to be done. And now we see that there's a lot to be done. Let's just keep stepping up to the plate.
any other questions? Ron, you are?
I'm Linda Williams, South Mountain University. I have a very important question. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic at all. But just recently, Congress had met to recommend the Save America Act. And of course, the House voted for it last week. This coming week, the senators have to vote for it, which means that if any of us votes, you have to have your birth certificate or passport. And as we know, many women, birth certificates have different names now. And majority of African Americans do not have passports. The driver's license doesn't mean anything anymore. And with the Senate, the way it is now, with only one person who may be able to have the Save America Act, what are we doing to prepare for that, if in case that does happen, but seemingly it rains. And this week coming up, the senators have to vote.
All we can do as from the voter registration and election office is follow the law. But what we will do is try to make sure everybody is informed of what needs to be done. And we have to look at the law more carefully to make sure that it's only going to affect those that have not registered already. It will probably, I have not looked at the law, but a lot of times when the laws come out, it affects those that have not registered. So if you're already a registered voters, that would be something that we will have to investigate and make sure everybody knows and not hear from hearsay, but know that it affects those that are just, have not registered yet. And it will be somebody that have moved to a new town or moved to a different area, but those that are already registered, because if you move from one town, one side of Orangeburg to another, all you're doing is changing your address, so you're not a new registered voter. So we would just have to check and see if that's for a new registered voter or someone that is currently registered, because you do not need to show your registration when you go to vote. What you will show is your ID, and your ID will have to match what we have on your registration. And so if you have to show a birth certificate, that means that we will have to go in our system and change everybody's name and all of that. So that's not going to, probably not gonna be a big change, because that's a big change that we will have to do in order for people to, because that means I won't. So, that's a big change, and it's something that they will have to think about. And even the women that are in, the Senate and representatives, that means that they will not be able to vote if they're married, so.
But this day and age, things have changed, and we've never thought we'd have a dictator or authoritarian. And that happened, and it's still happening as we're not speaking. So what folks do know that this Save America Act will not pass through the Senate next week. And that means that all of that, either a birth certificate or passport. So
The only thing we can do is just be educated, because there's nothing else we can do, because we don't have the right to make, we have the right to talk to the senators. So you need to know your representatives. So it's time to contact them. You vote, and even if you did not vote for them, you still have the right to talk to them. You still have the right to try to sway their opinion why you think that this is not a good thing. So we have to go out and make sure we talk to them. Everybody has the right to speak to them. Now, whether, they tell you to call back or whatever, we will be doing, candidates start filing for, elections for the primaries on Monday, start at 12. So if you want to meet any of those candidates or see any of those candidates or someone, that would like to file, then come on, out to our office. And you can sit there and wait on somebody and start asking questions. The sad thing is, you said the Senate is gonna be voting on it, but they are not the ones that are running this year. But you know who our senators are. We have 3 for Orangeburg County. So, just make sure that you speak with them and let them know your opinion. And if sometimes it's not easy to speak one-on-one, get you a group, invite them to a meeting. Call them up. They have delegation meeting quarterly. The next delegation meeting will be April the 15th. So come out. Nobody hardly comes from the public. That's the time you need to come and speak with them.
Thank you. Did you have a question?
Yes, I'm Shakia Hampton, locally right here from Orangeburg. I grew up in Calhoun County, went to schools in Calhoun County, down that way. I have 2 questions. My first question is about AI. I am a millennial, so I'm just gonna put that out there. So I'm a group that grew up with encyclopedias and when computers first came out, so it really doesn't matter to me which one do I use. Sometimes I write down things, sometimes I use the computer. However, when we was talking about AI, I often get in trouble with some of my baby boomers, and sometimes with my my mentor and my pastors, because I tell them, it's like, I really want to know how to do this, and I'm like, I don't really know whether I want to introduce this part to you, because it's deadly. AI is so, it's good in a way if you know how to use it. So the other day I was talking to one of my mentors and I showed them how I can, all the flyers look the same, but how misspell words if you're not keen and you plug it in. I said, see, this is how misinformation can get out so quickly. I said, however, you can use it in this form. It's good when you need to just come up with a plan. Then you say, oh, this is the plan, then you take that and you convert it. So I'm not totally against AI, but I'm not all for using everything AI tells you to use. So I'm more of like a relax. So that's the first question. Whoever want to answer that. And my second question is, I grew up in a family where home was school. When I went to church, it was school, and when I went to school, it was school. So I was getting a double dose away from home. Now I understand as a parent, people don't talk to their kids no more at the kitchen table. But I can remember the times where when we came home from school, we had to sit down and tell grandma or mom and dad what was school like. So when we talk about voter education or just education as a whole, social media has a big presence on these kids' life. And if you're not talking to them every day, it overtakes them. So that's another question. How do you view as some tools to fix the home? In other words, start back talking to the kids, because most kids now come home, I don't even know they got a parent watching them, to be honest with you. And they always have device or tablet. So those are my 2 things, and I'm gonna cut it off right. The first one was by AI. The second one was just about the home and education as we view it now. Thank you.
Okay, so first, let me circle back to Dr. Williams and say that. Yes, absolutely, call your senators, call whatever political figures you do. But also, I think if this law passes, then the next question would be, what is the role of civic society? What's the role of the church? What's the role of the sororities and fraternities and the NAACP and the whatever you belong to do that kind of old-fashioned stuff
of not just registering, but making sure people have the documents. Because that's the goal, right? To stop people, to put a barrier between you and the ballot box, right? The senators or the representatives that pass for this, that vote in favor of this thing, they have the means to get the documents. You know, paying, I don't know what it costs for a passport, but paying that money for a passport is not going to affect them. But it will affect, you know, somebody's grandmother who's living on a fixed income, who may not be able to do that, or who was born at home and does not have a birth certificate. You know, so the question becomes, and it's not impossible to do, right? It's how do we organize? How do we organize to make ourselves present at the ballot box in spite of whatever barriers? Because remember, before this, it was literacy tests, it was, you know, poll taxes, it was all these other things. So there's that. About AI, I think you answered your question. Right? So it is about, and this is what we try to do as educators. It is about, do you have the ability to discern? Right? Because we talk about the 1% in terms of financial, you know, all these millionaires and billionaires. But what AI, I think, is pointing us to is, are you able to use an old fashioned, my grandmother's voice, read and understand?
Say this.
Right? Make sense from nonsense.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I'm anti-AI for my students. I'm not even as generous as I'd say, right, you know, so that, you know, as educators, we have different approaches to that, right? But I always remind them of that. One, when you use it, you're giving your information, your intellectual property into this thing that is then going to use it, and you're not profiting from it, right? But then when it spits something back out to you, yeah, we know that it's not you. So what is it saying about you in terms of your ethics, in terms of your ability to actually master what we're trying to teach you? There's all that. So it's about discouragement, I think. Yes. And then your second thing about parenting. Having not had children, but being old, right? And so who pays for the cell phone that the child has, right? When they come home, when, you know, they insist they have to have the phone, when they come home, don't you have the ability to take it away from them?
What your mom was
I mean, you know, I went to school with people who at 7 o'clock, the TV in the house went off. I had cousins who only got half an hour of television per day, right? And they would be strategic as to how they use that 30 minutes, right? So the question becomes, what is the role of the parent? Because when they get to us in college, we ain't parenting. I mean,
well,
and it's not the job of the public school teacher to do that either, right? So, yeah.
And just, I mean, I think she said it in terms of the AI and just going back to my approach with AI, I know they're gonna do it. So it's like either we're going to find a way to get you out of this or work with it and still get you out of it. But in terms of the home, you mentioned something about sitting around the dinner table, and it's like, is there a dinner table? Do we all eat together and talk at the dinner table anymore? So I lost my train of thought, your question and where I was going with this, so I have to pass it off to Recognize. So it's that age.
Just to pick up on the part about family life. And yes, in many cases, there is no dinner table. So how do you do what you need to do, even though you don't have what you want to have? For me, and I have one daughter, one granddaughter, so I have to keep that as my reference. And what I do is, I tell her, show me how to do this on the phone, whatever that might be. And I use that as a means and a tool to teach her what I want to teach her while she's teaching me what she think I need. You just have to find a way to work through the situation, but help that child to know. My granddaughter will tell you right now, what Nana will go with and what Nana won't approve of. And she'll say, no, my Nana won't let me do that. And she says that to her friends. So that says that I'm doing okay. Maybe not A plus, maybe not even A, but I'm nowhere near C.
All right. So certainly this has been a lively discussion, and I think we should thank all of our panelists for. So as we conclude our discussion today, I just want to leave this with our panelists and the audience members. Considering the connections between faith, education, leadership, and the right to vote, what encouragement or challenge would you offer to the next generation, and we're already there, of women who want to lead with conviction, serve their communities, and help shape the future of the democracy? That's all I want everybody to think about. Because like some of you in here, I'm also old. Yeah, I've done my work, and so what is ahead of us now is really going to be in the hands of the generation that is already with us to make sure that this democracy does thrive, not just stand still or struggle, but strive and move forward. And as Dr. McLetchie said, so that this country does in fact be who it says it is. And that's it. So at this time, I just want to present a token of appreciation to all of our panelists on behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Orangeburg area. No particular order here. Thank you.
I would like to make a comment too, because I've been working with Angela's daughter, Angelica. We've been going.
Hold it. We're gonna give you all another round of applause and on the crowd. All the League of Women Voters of the Orangeburg area members, please stand. And you can introduce yourselves. I'll start with me. I'm Angela Blalock, co-president of the League of Women Voters here in the Orangeburg area.
I'm Patricia Haynes. I am a member of the League of Voters for Israel.
I'm Patricia Fry. I'm a member.
Linda Williams, co-partner of LWD.
I'm Angelica Blalock. I'm the Secretary and Communications Coordinator.
Quentin, well, I'm sorry, Quentin Moore, her brother, her son. I'm Dave Lee Smith, and I'm the treasurer.
Very important role.
Yes.
Sam.
Thank you so much. And that concludes our session for today, and refreshments are available here to my right. You have a question?
Yes, ma'am, I do. My name is Helen Carson. I'm a little ant in the room. I'm from Calhoun County, St. Matthews. I'm mayor of that little town.
Yeah.
I'm just very delighted to be in you all's midst. I got to tell you that I made many telephone calls to a number that I never got an answer from the League of Women Voters. I called Columbia, called different places how to get you all. So I didn't realize this is what, and first of all, I'm going to apologize. When you get a certain age, you start losing your hearing and other things. I'm at that place right now. So some of the information I'm sure I didn't get, but my reason for coming after I got an invitation from someone to come to this meeting, because I've always been engaged, still am engaged in getting people to not necessarily tell them how to vote, but to vote.
Right.
It's always been my forte, and I'm still a very I'm a activist, very much so, but I'm a grassroots person. I gotta say that. And my challenge perhaps is a little different than you all's challenge, because I'm from a very rural area. And sometimes it's very hard to get the word where we want it to be through the churches and other means. And things have changed now. It's not
Yes.
like how it used to be when I was in it like 30, 40 years ago. You can't go to church and do those things anymore. Have to find a new avenue. But I came because I was thirsty to hear what the thoughts were on making sure that people get the information, especially about I listen to the news and I'm very abreast on what is being said right now as far as people being able to vote and what have you, and making sure the vote is not suppressed is what I guess my whole thought process is, how to make that happen. And I know that people perish because of lack of knowledge. I do know that. So what I'm going to say is that I came to this meeting because I wanted to hear what your ideas and what have you were as to how best to disseminate that information. As I said, I come from a rural area, so I'm not just in St. Matthews. My arms reach way out into Calhoun County and other places. I'm very proud to be the first Black woman to be elected in the town of St. Matthews and the first woman to be elected. So I'm very proud of that stance. But I was in the field a long time before this
happened.
A long time, helping others to get where I felt, they could best serve. So that I'm just really happy to be here today and just to hear the viewpoints and what have you. As I said, I can't hear that well sometimes and I miss a lot of stuff, but I have for the longest time wanted to know how to get engaged and my women in Calhoun County, how to get them engaged in the League of Women Voters, because I think it's so important, the information that's being given. And that's where I came. When I saw that invitation, I said, oh God, I'm finally gonna be somewhere where I can see somebody or talk to somebody about that. I'm very excited.
Yes, and most of us are charter members.
Are you?
Of this league. And for me, it became an issue related to what I saw that was going to happen with Roe versus Wade. So I was a member first with the Columbia League of Women Voters. And then those members there, because there was not a league here, encouraged me to start a league in Orangeburg. We are, I'm sure, the youngest league in the state of South Carolina. Yes.
Very good. Very good. It's been useful information. I'm very happy to have it.
But I do want to applaud you for the I know that had to be and continues to be hard work.
Oh,
Is in Orangeburg area St. Matthews also?
Yes, we also include
Yes.
St. Matthews,
So you
not,
did?
not all of Calhoun County.
Well, never get anything.
I'll make sure that our information is exchanged.
Yes,
so we
and
can,
that
yeah,
we
be
are
a
in touch with
conversation.
you,
Mhm.
and you're
Yeah.
sitting beside the right person. Yeah.
Yes.
My neighbor.
Right.
And over here is an information table at the door that has information, of course, from Ms. Small's office and also from the League of Women Voters, and again, refreshments. So thank you all for coming
Yes.
and supporting this
And-
effort.
Thank you. I'm happy to.
Oh, one
I
more.
wanted to make sure that you all don't just sit and not engage. We are looking for workers, election workers. So I have an application.
I've been trying to get
So feel free to fill out an application.
Yes.
You are all welcome. We have seniors and those seniors are getting to the point that they're ready to step down. They can't because you won't help. And we need some workers. So I do have some workers here. have 3 workers here.
The poll workers, yeah.
4.
Yeah, there's, yeah.
Just quit on me.
Oh, I don't have.
But I need
Makes the
some workers, so please
Yeah,
fill out your application and think about working for us.